I never thought a piece of jewelry could cause so much pain, reveal so much truth, and ultimately deliver such sweet justice. But that's exactly what happened with my grandmother's ring, a ring that changed everything. The first time I noticed Vanessa staring at my hand was during our monthly girls' lunch. We'd been friends since college, 10 years of birthdays, breakups, and career milestones. She'd always been the glamorous one in our circle, designer clothes, luxury vacations, and a husband whose family name opened doors throughout the city. I was the steady one, the friend who built her life brick by careful brick, saving for my modest condo while working my way up at a small publishing house. Oh my God, Emma. Don't tell me that's an engagement ring? Vanessa's perfectly manicured hand shot across the table, grabbing my fingers before I could respond. The other women at our table, Melissa and Dana, immediately leaned in, their eyes widening with interest. No. I laughed, feeling suddenly self-conscious as 3 pairs of eyes examined the vintage ring on my right hand. It was my grandmother's. I just inherited it after she passed last month. The excitement around the table deflated slightly. Vanessa's grip loosened as she tilted her head, examining the ring with narrowed eyes. Oh, I thought it was from that architect you've been seeing. What's his name again? Michael? Matthew, I corrected gently. And no, we're not quite there yet. We've only been dating for 6 months. The ring itself was beautiful to me, a delicate band with an unusual stone set in an intricate antique setting. My grandmother had worn it every day of her married life. When she'd pressed it into my palm during my last visit before she passed, her paper-thin skin cool against mine, she'd whispered that it was more valuable than anyone knew. I'd assumed she meant sentimentally. Well, it's quaint. Vanessa released my hand and took a deliberate sip of her champagne. Very you. Something in her tone made my cheeks flush. I tucked my hand under the table, suddenly protective of my grandmother's keepsake. What kind of stone is that anyway? It's not a diamond, is it? Melissa asked, genuinely curious. I'm not actually sure, I admitted. My grandmother just said it was special to her. I thought I might take it to a jeweler to find out more about it. Vanessa laughed, the sound like breaking glass. If you have to ask what it is, it's probably not worth much. No offense, but it looks like something from one of those vintage costume jewelry stores. I felt a small knot form in my throat. It has sentimental value. Of course it does, honey. Vanessa patted my arm with such exaggerated sympathy that Dana shot me a look of quiet apology across the table. But when Matthew does propose, if things get that serious, make sure he knows your taste runs a bit more substantial. You don't want to end up with another trinket like that. The conversation mercifully moved on to Melissa's upcoming destination wedding, but Vanessa's dismissive words had lodged themselves under my skin. I found myself occasionally twisting the ring on my finger throughout lunch, remembering how my grandmother's eyes had twinkled when she'd given it to me, how she'd made me promise to keep its story alive. I should have let it go. In the grand scheme of friendship, it was a small slight, just Vanessa being Vanessa. She'd always had a talent for casually wounding remarks disguised as concern. But something about this particular dig felt different. It wasn't just about me, it was about my grandmother, her memory, her legacy. I had no idea then that this moment would be the first domino in a sequence that would change everything, that within months, Vanessa's casual cruelty would unlock a mystery, a fortune, and my own capacity for perfectly executed revenge. The next time my ring became the center of attention was at Melissa's engagement party 3 weeks later. I was at the bar waiting for a drink when Vanessa sidled up next to me, already several cocktails into the evening, judging by her flushed cheeks and loosened inhibitions. "Still wearing that little family trinket, I see," she said, gesturing toward my hand with her martini glass, nearly sloshing the contents onto my dress. I instinctively covered the ring with my other hand. "Of course. It means a lot to me." "God, you're so sentimental, Emma. It's adorable." She leaned in conspiratorially, her expensive perfume clouding around us. "You know what it reminds me of? Those little machines at the grocery store where kids put in quarters and get plastic rings. Remember those?" She laughed at her own joke, looking around to make sure others had heard her wit. I saw a few heads turn in our direction, including Matthew's. He'd been deep in conversation across the room, but was now watching our interaction with a concerned expression. My cheeks burned with embarrassment. "It's a family heirloom, Vanessa," I said quietly, struggling to keep my voice even. "I'd appreciate if you didn't make fun of it." "Oh, come on." "I'm just teasing." "Don't be so sensitive." She looped her arm through mine, pulling me toward a group of women I barely knew. Ladies, I was just telling Emma she needs to drop some hints to her boyfriend about proper jewelry. Look at this little vintage number she insists on wearing everywhere. Before I could protest, she'd grabbed my hand again, thrusting it toward the circle of women. They murmured polite comments, but I could see the same assessment in their eyes that I'd seen in Vanessa's: cheap, old-fashioned, insignificant. My husband would sleep in the garage if he ever presented me with something like that, Vanessa continued, twisting her own massive diamond engagement ring for emphasis. The stone caught the light, throwing miniature rainbows against the wall. I've trained him better. Some of us value things beyond their price tag, I managed to say, finally pulling my hand free. Sure, when you can't afford better, Vanessa replied with a dismissive laugh. I'm just saying you deserve nice things too, Emma. Don't settle for less just because you think it's all you can get. The bartender saved me by delivering my drink, giving me an excuse to step away. I found Matthew by the windows, my hands still shaking slightly from the encounter. Everything okay? He asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Vanessa seemed to be giving you a hard time. I took a large sip of my wine before answering. She's just being herself. Which means she thinks my grandmother's ring is cheap and tacky, and apparently I should be embarrassed to wear it. The words came out more bitter than I intended. Matthew gently took my hand, examining the ring with genuine interest. I think it's beautiful. Unusual, but that's what makes it special. He looked up at me, his eyes sincere. Like you. His words should have soothed the sting, but Vanessa's mocking tone still echoed in my head. I'd known her long enough to understand the implicit hierarchy in her world. The price of things directly correlated to their worth, and by extension, the worth of the people who owned them. Later that night, as Matthew and I walked to his car, I caught Vanessa and her husband, Richard, by the valet stand. She was too far away to notice me, but I heard her loud, carrying laugh and saw her gesture toward me while whispering something to Richard. He glanced in my direction with that same look of amused pity I was beginning to recognize all too well. What's her problem? Matthew asked, following my gaze. Status, I replied simply. Everything in Vanessa's world has to have the right label, the right price tag, the right zip code. We've been friends for so long that she usually exempts me from her judgment, but this ring, I twisted it on my finger. For some reason it really bothers her. Maybe you should have it appraised, Matthew suggested as he opened the car door for me. Your grandmother thought it was valuable, right? Could be interesting to find out its actual worth. Maybe, I said, not really considering it. The ring's value to me wasn't in dollars and cents. But that night, lying awake in bed while Matthew slept beside me, I kept thinking about my grandmother's final words about the ring. What if she hadn't been speaking metaphorically? What if there was more to her cryptic comment about its value than I'd assumed? The thought wouldn't leave me alone. The next morning, instead of heading straight to work, I made a detour to a small jeweler in the older part of the city. The shop had been there for decades, the kind of place that felt more like a museum than a retail store, with worn carpet and display cases that had probably been installed when my grandmother was young. The elderly jeweler, Mr. Harmon, according to the faded nameplate on his desk, spent a long time examining my ring, his magnifying glass held close to his eye. His silence made me increasingly nervous. Is something wrong with it? I finally asked. He looked up, his expression unreadable. Where did you get this piece, if you don't mind my asking? It was my grandmother's. She left it to me when she passed away recently. And did she tell you anything about it? I hesitated. Just that it was more valuable than anyone knew. I assumed she meant sentimentally valuable. Mr. Harmon carefully set the ring down on a black velvet pad between us. Your grandmother was correct, but I suspect she wasn't just speaking of sentimental value. He removed his jeweler's loupe and folded his hands on the counter. This is quite an exceptional piece. The setting is platinum, late 1920s if I had to guess. But it's the stone that's remarkable. My heart began to beat faster. What kind of stone is it? A very rare pink diamond. Natural pink diamonds of this color saturation and clarity are extraordinarily uncommon. He picked up the ring again, tilting it under the light. This particular stone appears to be just over 3 carats. Without proper testing, I can't be absolutely certain, but if it's what I believe it to be, this ring is extremely valuable. How valuable? I whispered, suddenly aware of how casually I'd been wearing it around the city. Mr. Harmon removed his glasses and polished them thoughtfully before answering. A natural pink diamond of this quality could be worth anywhere from $500,000 to several $1 million, depending on its exact specifications. The room seemed to tilt around me. That's not possible. I assure you it's quite possible. Pink diamonds, especially those from the Argyle mine in Australia, are among the rarest and most valuable gemstones in the world. The mine has recently closed, making existing stones even more precious. He studied my shocked expression with concern. Did you not have any idea? None, I breathed, staring at the ring as if seeing it for the first time. My grandmother never mentioned anything about its value. She wasn't wealthy. She lived in the same modest house for 50 years. How could she have owned something like this? Mr. Harmon smiled gently. Jewelry often has stories behind it that even families don't fully know. Would you like me to arrange for a formal appraisal? I have a colleague who specializes in rare colored diamonds. I nodded, still dazed. Yes, please. And ... Are there any precautions I should be taking? Insurance or something? Definitely insurance once we have an official appraisal. And discretion might be wise. Items of this value can sometimes attract unwanted attention. As I left the shop, the ring felt suddenly heavy on my finger, laden with questions. Who had given it to my grandmother? Why had she never sold it, even during the financial struggles I knew she'd faced after my grandfather died? And why had she chosen to pass it to me, with only the cryptic hint about its true value? I called in sick to work and spent the day in a daze, alternating between staring at the ring and searching online for information about pink diamonds. Every article I found only confirmed what Mr. Harmon had told me. They were extraordinarily rare, increasingly valuable, and highly coveted by collectors and investors. That evening, when Matthew came over with soup, assuming I was actually ill, I finally told him what I'd discovered. Holy shit! He breathed, carefully examining the ring as if it might explode. You've been wearing millions of dollars on your hand to grocery shop. Apparently, I still couldn't wrap my mind around it. And Vanessa's been mocking it for weeks. Matthew's face broke into a slow grin. Oh, that's actually kind of perfect. What do you mean? Just imagining her face if she knew. He handed the ring back to me. The woman who judges everyone based on the price of their possessions has been treating a multi-million-dollar ring like it came from a cereal box. For the first time since Mr. Harmon's revelation, I smiled. There was something deliciously ironic about it. Vanessa, with all her status consciousness and designer obsessions, had completely missed the value of something right in front of her. But as satisfying as the irony was, I had no intention of telling her or anyone else about my discovery. The ring was my private connection to my grandmother, and learning its financial worth didn't change its personal meaning to me. That resolution lasted exactly 8 days. The formal appraisal came back even higher than Mr. Harmon had estimated. The pink diamond was exceptionally rare, with a unique provenance that traced back to a renowned jewelry collection from the 1920s. The appraiser, a severe woman with thick glasses and an intimidating knowledge of gemology, valued the ring at $3.2 million. I immediately arranged for specialized insurance and a safe deposit box at my bank, wearing the ring only for special occasions now that I understood its true value. I hadn't told anyone except Matthew, not even my parents, partly because I was still processing the information myself. Then came Vanessa's birthday party, an extravagant affair at her husband's family estate in the countryside. I almost didn't attend, still smarting from her previous comments, but our shared history and my own stubborn pride pushed me to go. I wore a simple black dress, my grandmother's ring safely locked away in the bank vault. It should have been a pleasant evening. The setting was beautiful, the food exquisite, and Matthew was attentively by my side. But throughout the night I kept catching Vanessa watching me, a slight smirk playing on her lips whenever our eyes met. During dinner I understood why. Seated at Vanessa's carefully curated table of 10, the conversation inevitably turned to jewelry when Richard presented her with a stunning diamond tennis bracelet as a birthday gift. It's beautiful, I said sincerely as the bracelet made its way around the table for admiration. Thank you, Emma. Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. I noticed you're not wearing your grandmother's ring tonight. Finally took my advice about upgrading your accessories? The table went quiet. Matthew's hand found mine under the tablecloth, a gentle squeeze of support. Not at all, I replied evenly. I just decided to save it for special occasions. Her eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. And my birthday isn't special enough? I'm wounded. Before I could respond, Richard jumped in. Oh, the famous ugly ring. Vanessa showed me a picture. Good call leaving it at home, Emma. Some heirlooms are better kept in a drawer. My cheeks burned. Excuse me? Richard, stop! Vanessa laughed, not sounding the least bit sorry. Emma's very attached to her little trinket. Though I still think you should let Matthew buy you something more current. That thing looks like it should be buried with a pharaoh. The table erupted in polite laughter, even from people who barely knew me. Matthew's grip on my hand tightened, but I gently pulled away, placing both palms flat on the table as I leaned forward. You took a picture of my ring to show people? My voice was quiet, but something in my tone made the laughter stop abruptly. Vanessa waved dismissively, just to show Richard what we were talking about after Melissa's engagement party. Don't be so sensitive. I'm not being sensitive. I'm trying to understand why my grandmother's ring is such a source of entertainment for you. Oh, come on, Emma. Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. It was just a silly conversation. Richard and I were talking about how some people confuse sentimental value with actual value. Your ring was just a convenient example. Of what exactly? My voice had gone dangerously soft. Of, she floundered momentarily before regaining her confidence, of how people sometimes hold on to things because they don't know any better. You could have something beautiful and modern, but instead you're carrying around that outdated costume piece like it's the Hope Diamond. She laughed at her own joke, looking around the table for support. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that coursing through my veins. It was a cold, calculated realization that Vanessa had never respected me, that her friendship came with the unspoken condition that I remained slightly beneath her, a convenient backdrop against which she could showcase her own superiority. You know what, Vanessa? I said quietly. You're right about one thing. I have been too sentimental about our friendship. Her smile faltered. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm starting to see things more clearly now. I stood up, placing my napkin beside my half-eaten dessert. Thank you for dinner. Happy birthday. I walked away from the table, aware of the startled silence behind me. Matthew caught up with me in the hallway, concern etched across his face. Are you okay? That was pretty intense. I'm fine, and surprisingly I was. The hurt I'd expected to feel had been replaced by something colder and more focused. I think it's time to go home. On the drive back to the city, Matthew kept glancing at me worriedly. I've never seen you like this before. Like what? So calm. She humiliated you in front of everyone and you're just sitting there looking almost peaceful. I turned to look at him, a small smile playing on my lips. I'm not peaceful. I'm planning what? The streetlights cast alternating patterns of light and shadow across his concerned face as I considered how much to share. Matthew was kind, ethical, principled, all the things I loved about him. But what I was beginning to envision required none of those qualities. I'm going to teach Vanessa a lesson about value. Real value. He frowned. You're not going to tell her about the ring, are you? After what the appraiser said about discretion? No, not yet. I turned back to watch the road ahead, the pieces of a plan already beginning to arrange themselves in my mind. But eventually, yes. When the time is right. When it will mean something. Mean what? That's what I need to figure out. The next morning, I began my research in earnest. If I was going to use my grandmother's unexpected gift to teach Vanessa a lesson, I needed to understand exactly what I was working with and how to maximize its impact. I learned everything I could about pink diamonds, their rarity, their market, the kinds of people who typically owned them. I discovered that major auction houses like Sotheby's and Christie's occasionally featured similar pieces, and that the publicity surrounding such sales often attracted international attention. I also began paying closer attention to Vanessa's social patterns. Our friendship had always been somewhat one-sided, with me adapting to her schedule, her preferences, her social circle. Now I observed these dynamics with new eyes, noting how carefully she curated her public image, especially on social media. Vanessa's Instagram account was a masterclass in strategic life presentation, every image designed to showcase wealth, exclusivity, and taste. Her 40,000 followers eagerly consumed her lifestyle content, from vacation photos at exclusive resorts to carefully arranged tableaux of designer purchases. She had even begun cultivating relationships with luxury brands, receiving free products in exchange for carefully worded endorsements. This social media presence, I realized, was not just vanity, it was currency. Vanessa traded in perception, and the carefully maintained impression of her perfect, enviable life was her most valuable asset. That's when the outline of my plan began to take shape. 2 weeks after her birthday party, Vanessa called as if nothing had happened. This wasn't surprising. Her typical pattern after causing offense was to simply pretend the incident never occurred, expecting everyone else to follow her lead. "Emma! I'm organizing a charity gala for the Children's Hospital Board, and I need your help with the press releases." You're so much better with words than I am. No apology, no acknowledgement of her behavior. Just the assumption that I would, as always, be available to support her endeavors. In the past, I would have agreed immediately, grateful to be included. This time, I hesitated just long enough to make her uncomfortable. "Emma? Are you there?" "I'm here," I replied coolly. "When's the gala?" 8 weeks from Saturday. "It's going to be amazing. Richard's firm is underwriting the whole thing, and we've secured the grand ballroom at the Kimpton. Very exclusive, only 300 tickets." "Sounds impressive." I kept my tone neutral, revealing nothing of my thoughts. "So you'll help with the press materials?" "I need someone who can make me sound philanthropic but not self-important." She laughed, the sound brittle through the phone. "It's harder than it looks." "I imagine it is." I paused deliberately. "All right, I'll help. Send me the details." "Perfect! You're a lifesaver." "Oh, and it's black tie, of course. You should start looking for a dress now. The good ones always sell out early." After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone, the first piece of my plan clicking into place. The charity gala would provide the perfect setting for what I had in mind. A public event with high visibility, attended by precisely the social circle Vanessa was so desperate to impress. That afternoon, I retrieved my grandmother's ring from the bank vault and took it to a different jeweler, this one in the heart of the city's luxury shopping district. Unlike Mr. Harmon's discreet establishment, this shop catered to celebrities and the ultra-wealthy, with armed security and appointment-only service. I met with their custom design specialist, a poised woman named Claire who didn't bat an eye when I explained what I wanted. "We can certainly create a more modern setting for your stone," she assured me, examining the ring under her loupe. "Though I must say, the current setting has historical value as well. It's quite a lovely example of Art Deco craftsmanship." "I'm not looking to reset it permanently," I explained. "I want something temporary, a setting that showcases the diamond more dramatically for a special event, but allows me to return it to the original setting afterward." Claire considered this, her professional demeanor never slipping despite the unusual request. "We could create what we call a convertible piece, a modern setting designed to securely hold your diamond for the evening, after which we would return it to its original mounting. It's not common, but it's certainly possible." "Perfect." I smiled, imagining Vanessa's face when she saw the transformed ring. "How dramatic can you make it?" Claire's eyes sparkled with professional interest. "With a stone of this quality? As dramatic as you'd like." We spent the next hour discussing designs, eventually settling on a spectacular platinum setting with smaller diamonds arranged in a sunburst pattern around the pink diamond. The effect would be unmistakable, a piece of jewelry impossible to ignore or dismiss as costume. "There's one more thing," I said as our consultation was wrapping up. "I'd like this to remain completely confidential. No social media posts about the project, no mention of it to other clients." Claire nodded understanding. "Of course. Discretion is standard practice for all our clients, especially when dealing with stones of significant value." As I left the jeweler, I felt a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension. The plan forming in my mind wasn't like me, or at least not like the person I'd always thought myself to be. I'd never been vindictive or calculating. But then again, I'd never had a friend deliberately humiliate me over something so personal either. The next stage required delicate timing. I began declining Vanessa's invitations to smaller social gatherings, citing work commitments. This wasn't entirely a fabrication. I had taken on additional projects at the publishing house, partly to distract myself and partly to finance the custom jewelry setting without touching my savings. When we did interact, I was cordial but distant, no longer sharing personal details or responding to her probing questions about my relationship with Matthew. I could see her growing increasingly puzzled by my behavior, unused to any resistance in our friendship. Meanwhile, I threw myself into the press materials for her charity gala with unexpected enthusiasm. I crafted compelling copy that subtly positioned Vanessa as the driving force behind the event, knowing how much the perception of philanthropic leadership meant to her. I arranged for coverage in several local publications and even secured a mention in a national magazine's Events to Watch column. "This is incredible," Vanessa gushed during one of our planning meetings, scanning the media list I'd compiled. "How did you get Harmon Lifestyle magazine to commit to coverage?" They never feature local charity events. I shrugged modestly. I have a contact there from work. I might have mentioned that several notable collectors would be attending, possibly wearing some exceptional pieces. Her eyes lit up with interest. Really? Like who? I can't say for sure yet, I replied cryptically, but I'm working on something special. This vague hint was enough to set Vanessa's imagination racing. She immediately began speculating about which of her wealthy acquaintances might bring noteworthy jewelry to the event, already envisioning the social media opportunities. Little did she know that the exceptional piece I had in mind would be adorning my own hand, a revelation I was carefully orchestrating for maximum impact. As the weeks passed, my plan developed additional layers. Beyond simply revealing the ring's value, I wanted Vanessa to fully understand the depth of her misjudgment, not just of the jewelry, but of me. This required a more comprehensive approach. I began by cultivating relationships with several people I knew Vanessa was eager to impress. The editor of a prominent style magazine who lived in my building, a gallery owner who had once expressed interest in my writing, a philanthropist who served on multiple charity boards, small conversations, casual coffees, nothing that would raise suspicions, just enough connection to ensure they would be receptive when I eventually reached out about the gala. I also scheduled a meeting with an auction house specialist, ostensibly to discuss the possibility of selling my grandmother's ring. I had no intention of actually parting with it, but I needed to establish a paper trail and gather specific information about how such a sale would be publicized. The specialist, a fastidious man named Jonathan Ward, was visibly excited when I showed him photographs of the diamond. This is precisely the type of piece that generates significant international interest, he explained, pulling up examples of previous sales on his tablet. For a pink diamond of this quality and size, we would implement a comprehensive marketing strategy, preview events in major cities, features in our catalog, private viewings for serious collectors. And how public would this process be? I asked, feigning concern. I'm relatively private about my financial affairs. Jonathan smiled reassuringly. Many of our clients share that sentiment. While the diamond itself would be prominently featured in our marketing materials, your identity could remain confidential if you preferred. We would list the piece as property from a private collection, or something similarly discreet. But people in my social circle might still make the connection? That would depend on how widely known your ownership of the piece is. Has it been photographed? Featured on social media? I thought of Vanessa's surreptitious photograph, shared with her husband and who knew how many others for their amusement. It's possible some people might recognize it, yes. Then yes, there could be some local recognition. In fact, for exceptional pieces like this, that can sometimes enhance the provenance story and increase interest. He leaned forward slightly. Is that a concern for you? Not at all, I replied with a small smile. I was just curious about the process. As I left the auction house, another piece of my plan fell into place. I now had expert confirmation of exactly how valuable my ring was, along with professional language to describe it. I also understood how such pieces were marketed and the kind of attention they typically received. 4 weeks before the gala, I contacted the jeweler to check on the progress of the custom setting. Claire invited me in for a final fitting, and the result exceeded my expectations. The pink diamond, removed from my grandmother's vintage setting and placed in the modern sunburst design, was transformed, no longer a subtle, understated piece but a show-stopping statement that demanded attention. It's perfect, I breathed, watching how the stone caught the light, appearing to glow from within. It's one of the most spectacular pieces I've had the pleasure of working on, Claire admitted. Your grandmother had extraordinary taste. I arranged to pick up both settings, the original and the temporary one, the day before the gala. Claire assured me that the stone would be securely set in the new mounting and could be returned to its original setting whenever I wished. With the jewelry arranged, I turned my attention to the final components of my plan. I needed to ensure that Vanessa's humiliation would be public, but not immediately destructive. I wanted her to feel the sting of her misjudgment deeply, to recognize the pattern of her behavior, but I didn't want to destroy her completely. Despite everything, our decade of friendship meant something to me. I drafted a series of emails to the contacts I'd cultivated, casual notes mentioning that I would be attending Vanessa's charity gala and looking forward to seeing them there. To the Style magazine editor, I added a hint that I would be wearing a family piece with an interesting history. To the gallery owner, I mentioned my interest in art that explored themes of perception and value. Small breadcrumbs, nothing obvious, just enough to ensure their interest would be piqued when the moment came. The week before the gala, I met Matthew for dinner at a quiet restaurant away from our usual haunts. He'd been supportive but increasingly concerned as he watched my planning unfold. "Are you sure about this?" he asked after I'd outlined the final details of what I intended to do. "It seems elaborate for making a point about a rude comment." I twirled pasta around my fork, considering how to explain. "It's not about a single rude comment. It's about 10 years of subtle undermining, of being treated like an accessory rather than a friend. The ring was just the catalyst that made me finally see the pattern." Matthew reached across the table to take my hand. "I understand that she hurt you. I'm just worried this whole revenge scenario is consuming you. I've never seen you so calculating." His concern was valid. Over the past weeks, I'd devoted countless hours to orchestrating this moment of revelation. I'd lain awake at night imagining Vanessa's face when she realized her mistake, rehearsing exactly what I would say, how I would stand, the precise tone of voice I would use. "Maybe you're right," I admitted, "but I need to see this through. After it's done, I promise things will go back to normal." "Define normal," he said with a wry smile. "Because I'm not sure your friendship with Vanessa can ever be normal again, regardless of how this plays out." He was right, of course. Whatever happened at the gala would irrevocably change my relationship with Vanessa. In truth, that relationship was already transformed. I could never again be the accommodating friend who absorbed her casual cruelties without response. "Maybe not with Vanessa," I conceded. "But with myself, I need to do this to close this chapter and move forward." Matthew studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Okay. If you're sure this is what you need, I support you. Just try not to enjoy her humiliation too much." His lips quirked in a half-smile. "It's a little unnerving seeing my compassionate girlfriend turn into a mastermind of social revenge." I laughed, some of the tension releasing from my shoulders. Noted. No evil laughter or dramatic villain monologues. The night before the gala, I retrieved my grandmother's ring in its spectacular new setting from the jeweler. At home, I tried it on with my dress, a simple black column that would provide the perfect backdrop for the jewelry's drama. The effect was exactly as I'd hoped, elegant but unmistakably valuable, the pink diamond drawing all attention. I slept poorly that night, my mind cycling through various scenarios of how the next evening might unfold. By morning, I felt simultaneously exhausted and wired, like I'd consumed too much caffeine on an empty stomach. Matthew called to check in while I was getting my hair done at the salon. "Still going through with Operation Diamond Revenge?" he asked, his tone light but concerned. "It's happening," I confirmed, ignoring the curious glance from my stylist. "Are you still okay being my +1 for this mission?" "Wouldn't miss it. Though I still think you should consider a simpler approach. Maybe just tell her privately that her comments hurt you and the ring is actually valuable." I sighed. That's what the old Emma would do, the one who let Vanessa walk all over her for a decade. And the new Emma is, what? Someone who orchestrates elaborate public takedowns? His question gave me pause. Was that who I wanted to be? Someone who invested weeks of planning into a moment of retribution? "No," I said finally. "The new Emma is someone who stands up for herself. Someone who doesn't let others define her worth, or the worth of things that matter to her." I paused. "But you're right that this has gotten involved. I'll try to find a balance. That's all I'm asking," Matthew replied, sounding relieved. "See you at 7? "See you at 7. After hanging up, I sat quietly as the stylist finished arranging my hair in a sleek updo. Matthew's concern had stirred something in me, a question about what exactly I was trying to accomplish. Was this about justice, or had it become something darker? Was I risking becoming as status-obsessed as Vanessa, just in a different way? By the time I returned home to finish getting ready, I'd made a slight adjustment to my plan. I would still wear the ring in its dramatic new setting. I would still allow Vanessa to see the error of her judgment, but I would try to find a way to do it that preserved some dignity for both of us. As I applied my makeup and slipped into my dress, I thought about my grandmother. She had owned this extraordinarily valuable diamond for decades, but had never flaunted it or used it to elevate her social status. She had appreciated its beauty and significance quietly, finding joy in it without needing external validation. There was wisdom in that approach that I had nearly forgotten in my focus on vindicating myself. The ring's true value wasn't in its ability to impress others or humiliate Vanessa. It was in what it represented. My grandmother's life, her love story, her legacy. I was still contemplating this when Matthew arrived, handsome in his tuxedo, his expression softening when he saw me. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing me gently, "and slightly less vengeful than the last time we spoke." I laughed, feeling some of my tension dissolve. "I've been thinking about what you said, about finding a balance, and I'm still going to wear the ring. I'm still going to let Vanessa see it. But I'm going to try to be measured in how I handle it." He looked skeptical. "Measured how, exactly?" "I'm not entirely sure yet." I held out my hand, the pink diamond catching the light. "But I think I'll know when the moment comes." Matthew whistled softly, seeing the transformed ring for the first time. "That is not subtle. That's rather the point. Vanessa is going to have a stroke when she sees it." I smiled, slipping on my coat. "Let's hope not. An actual medical emergency would really dampen the evening." The drive to the Kimpton Grand Ballroom was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts. When we arrived, the scene was exactly as Vanessa had described: elegant, exclusive, meticulously orchestrated to showcase the charitable impulses of the city's elite. A red carpet led from the street to the entrance, complete with a step-and-repeat banner featuring the hospital's logo alongside the names of major donors. Vanessa herself was stationed just inside the entrance, greeting guests alongside Richard and the hospital's chief of pediatrics. She was resplendent in a champagne-colored gown that emphasized her slim figure, her hair arranged in an elaborate updo adorned with what appeared to be diamond hairpins. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me, taking in my relatively simple dress with a quick head-to-toe assessment that I'd grown accustomed to over the years. "Emma, you made it." She air-kissed both my cheeks, her perfume overwhelming. "And Matthew, so handsome in a tux. I was beginning to think you two had dropped off the planet these past few weeks." "Just busy with work," I replied smoothly. "The gala looks amazing, Vanessa. All your hard work has really paid off." She preened at the compliment. "We've already exceeded our fundraising goal, and the silent auction doesn't even close for another 2 hours. Richard says we might set a record for a first-year event." Throughout this exchange, I had kept my left hand casually tucked into the crook of Matthew's arm, the ring temporarily hidden from view. Now I reached out to touch Vanessa's arm in congratulation, allowing the pink diamond to catch the light. "That's wonderful news. You should be very proud." Her sentence cut off abruptly as her gaze locked onto my hand. For a moment, she seemed unable to process what she was seeing, her social smile frozen in place while her eyes widened with confusion. "My God, what is that?" she finally managed, reaching for my hand before stopping herself, remembering we were in public. "Oh, this?" I glanced down at the ring as if just remembering it was there. "It's my grandmother's ring. I had it reset for tonight's event." That can't be the same ring?" Vanessa's voice had taken on a strange, tight quality. "The one you wore before was different. Same stone, different setting," I explained calmly. The jeweler was able to create this modern mounting while preserving the original for everyday wear. Richard, noticing his wife's distraction, turned to see what had captured her attention. His reaction was less controlled than Vanessa's, a visible double-take followed by an appreciative whistle. "Now that's a serious rock," he said, eyeing the ring with newfound respect. "Is that a pink diamond?" "It is," I confirmed. "Natural pink, just over 3 carats. It's been in my family for nearly a century." Vanessa's face had gone very still, a flush creeping up her neck as the implications began to dawn on her. "I don't understand." "That ring, the one you always wore, looked quite different in its vintage setting." I finished for her. "Yes, it didn't showcase the diamond as dramatically. My grandmother preferred understated elegance." The hospital administrator, oblivious to the undercurrents of our conversation, leaned in with professional interest. "That's a remarkable piece of jewelry. I've only seen pink diamonds of that size in museums." "They are quite rare," Matthew chimed in helpfully, "especially natural ones from the Argyle mine. The market for them has gone absolutely crazy since the mine closed." Vanessa's eyes darted between my face and the ring, her social mask slipping to reveal naked calculation beneath. I could almost see her mentally revising every dismissive comment she'd ever made about my cheap trinket, every condescending smirk, every behind-my-back photograph shared for amusement. How valuable is it?" she finally asked, her voice unnaturally high. This was the moment I'd been planning for weeks, the perfect opportunity to deliver the crushing revelation of exactly how wrong she'd been, how foolish she'd looked mocking a multi-million-dollar diamond. I could tell her the precise appraisal value, watch her face crumple with the realization, perhaps even mention the auction house's interest. But looking at her now, her carefully constructed poise beginning to crack, her eyes darting nervously to the gathering crowd of guests, I felt an unexpected wave of something close to pity. Vanessa's entire identity was built around being the woman who recognized and owned the best of everything. To publicly shatter that image would be a devastation beyond what I'd initially imagined. Its financial value is significant, I said after a measured pause. But to me, its real worth is sentimental. My grandmother wore it every day of her married life. Vanessa swallowed hard, recognizing the echo of my earlier words, the very sentiment she had mocked so dismissively at her birthday dinner. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound emerged. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of more guests requiring Vanessa's attention. With a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, she turned away, her posture rigid with suppressed emotion. Matthew squeezed my arm as we moved into the ballroom. That was unexpectedly merciful. Was it? I wasn't entirely sure myself what had just happened. The confrontation I'd planned for weeks had unfolded differently than I'd anticipated, leaving me with conflicted feelings. I didn't give her the full details, but she got the message. She definitely got the message. Matthew guided me toward the bar. I think your restraint actually made it worse for her. She's going to spend the entire night wondering exactly how valuable that ring is, and exactly how stupid she looks for mocking it. He was right. Throughout the evening, I caught Vanessa watching me from across the room, her expression a complex mixture of embarrassment, calculation, and something that might have been regret. She made no attempt to approach me again, focusing instead on her hosting duties with an almost manic intensity. I, meanwhile, found myself the unexpected center of attention. The ring drew compliments and inquiries from guests who had never given me a second glance at previous social functions. The style magazine editor I'd cultivated approached early in the evening, professionally curious about the family piece I'd mentioned. It's extraordinary, she said, examining the ring with expert appreciation. Would you consider letting us feature it in our heirloom series? We showcase jewelry with interesting histories. Perhaps, I replied noncommittally. It does have quite a story behind it. Similar conversations repeated throughout the evening. The gallery owner, the philanthropist, even the hospital administrator who had overheard our earlier exchange. Each interaction further established the ring's significance in a way that would inevitably filter back to Vanessa. By the time dinner was served, a subtle shift had occurred in the room's dynamics. People who had previously gravitated toward Vanessa now found reasons to engage with me, drawn by the mystery of the spectacular pink diamond and the vague intimations of its value that had begun circulating. I watched this unfold with mixed emotions. The vindication I'd anticipated felt hollow somehow, tainted by the recognition that I was participating in the same value system I despised in Vanessa, allowing material worth to determine social standing. During dessert, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. We need to talk. Meet me in the ladies' lounge in 10 minutes. Please. The please was unexpected, a word that rarely entered Vanessa's vocabulary when making demands. I showed the message to Matthew, who raised his eyebrows. Are you going to go? I considered for a moment. Yes. This conversation was inevitable. Want me to wait nearby? In case it gets ugly? I shook my head. No, this is between Vanessa and me. I'll be fine. 10 minutes later, I pushed open the door to the ladies' lounge, an opulent space with a separate sitting area designed for guests needing a moment away from the event. Vanessa was already there, pacing nervously between the velvet couches, her champagne gown catching the light with each turn. She stopped abruptly when she saw me, her carefully applied makeup unable to fully conceal the redness around her eyes. She'd been crying. How long have you known? She demanded without preamble. I closed the door behind me, ensuring our privacy. About the ring's value? Since a few weeks after your first comment about it, I had it appraised after Melissa's engagement party. And you didn't say anything? You just let me keep making a fool of myself? There was something almost childlike in her outrage, a genuine bewilderment that I hadn't immediately corrected her misconception. Would you have believed me if I'd told you? I asked quietly. Or would you have assumed I was making it up to save face? She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again, unable to deny the truth of my assessment. Vanessa had never been one to revise her judgments easily, especially when they aligned with her predetermined hierarchies of worth. Is it really worth what Richard thinks? She finally asked, her voice smaller now. He says pink diamonds that size can be worth millions. It is. And you've been wearing it to grocery shop and coffee dates. She gave a hollow laugh. God, I must have looked so stupid. That wasn't my intention, I said, surprising myself with the realization that it was true, at least not initially. I didn't know its value either until I had it appraised, but tonight was deliberate. It wasn't a question. The new setting, bringing it to my event, you wanted everyone to see it, to see me realize my mistake. I couldn't deny it. Yes. Vanessa sank onto one of the couches, the fight seeming to drain out of her. Because of what I said at my birthday dinner. Because of a pattern, Vanessa. I remained standing, unwilling to soften this moment with false intimacy. The ring was just the tipping point. For years, you've treated me like a slightly defective accessory, useful to have around but fundamentally less valuable than you and your real friends. That's not fair, she protested, but there was little conviction in her voice. I've always included you. Inclusion isn't friendship. Not when it comes with constant reminders of my place in your hierarchy. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her perfectly manicured hands. So tonight was what? Revenge? Payback for a decade of perceived slights? Maybe at first, I admitted. But standing at the entrance earlier, seeing your face when you recognized the ring, I realized I didn't want to humiliate you. I just wanted you to see me, really see me, for once. Vanessa looked up, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. And did it work? Do you feel seen now? The question caught me off guard with its unexpected perceptiveness. Did I? The evening had unfolded differently than I'd planned, the vindication I'd sought transforming into something more complex along the way. I'm not sure, I answered honestly. But I do know that I can't go back to how things were between us. I won't be the friend you call when you need help with press releases but mock behind my back. I won't smile through your helpful critiques of my clothes or my relationship or my career choices. So what, we're just done? 10 years of friendship thrown away over a misunderstanding about a ring? It wasn't about the ring, I said firmly. It was about respect, about seeing value in things, and people, beyond their price tag or status. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its defensive edge. I never thought of our friendship that way. I always assumed you understood, that it was just how we operated. That's part of the problem. You assumed I accepted a dynamic I was just enduring. She flinched at the word enduring, her gaze dropping back to her hands. I don't know how to fix this. I'm not sure it can be fixed, I replied honestly. At least not right away. Some patterns are too ingrained to change overnight. So that's it? You orchestrated this whole evening just to tell me our friendship is over. I considered her question carefully. Was that what tonight had been about? An elaborate goodbye to a relationship that had defined much of my adult life? No, I finally said. I think I orchestrated it to show both of us the truth. About the ring, about our friendship, about the values we've been operating on. What happens next depends on what we do with that truth. Vanessa looked up at me, really looked, perhaps for the first time in our decade-long association. And what do you want to happen next? It was the question I'd been avoiding in all my planning, all my focus on the moment of revelation. What did I want? Continued friendship with new boundaries? A clean break? Something in between? I don't know yet, I admitted, but I do know I'm done pretending. If we're going to have any relationship going forward, it has to be authentic. No more hierarchies, no more passive-aggressive comments, no more using each other for social convenience. I'm not sure I know how to do that, Vanessa said, the admission clearly costing her. This is who I've always been? Then maybe we do need to be done. The words hurt to say, but they also carried a strange relief, the acknowledgement of a truth we'd both been avoiding. Maybe some friendships aren't meant to evolve. Vanessa stood abruptly, smoothing her gown with shaking hands. I should get back. I'm the hostess, after all. I nodded, recognizing her retreat into the familiar role as a form of self-protection. Your event is a success. You should be proud. She paused at the door, her back to me. For what it's worth, I am sorry. About the ring. About other things too, probably. It wasn't a full apology, not even close to addressing the patterns I'd named. But it was possibly the most genuine thing Vanessa had ever said to me. I know, I replied softly. After she left, I remained in the lounge for several minutes, processing what had just happened. The confrontation I'd anticipated for weeks had unfolded into something far more nuanced than simple revenge, a painful but necessary reckoning for a friendship built on an unstable foundation. Eventually, I made my way back to the ballroom where Matthew was waiting, concern evident in his expression. "How did it go?" he asked, pulling me slightly away from the crowd. "It was clarifying," I said, still processing the conversation myself. "I think our friendship might be over." Matthew studied my face. "Are you okay with that?" "I think I am," I realized, surprised by the certainty I felt. "It's been ending for a long time. The ring just forced us both to see it." "And the grand revenge plan?" I glanced across the room to where Vanessa had resumed her duties as hostess, her smile firmly back in place, though slightly dimmed around the edges. "Turned out to be unnecessary. Sometimes just showing the truth is enough." Matthew squeezed my hand, careful of the ring. "So what happens to this now? Back to the bank vault?" I looked down at my grandmother's diamond, spectacular in its temporary setting, but essentially unchanged in its fundamental value, just as it had been in its modest original mounting. "No, I think I'll have it reset in the original setting tomorrow." "That's how my grandmother wanted it to be seen." "And how do you want it to be seen?" I smiled, thinking of my grandmother's quiet confidence, her unassuming dignity, her understanding of what truly mattered. For what it is, beautiful and valuable whether anyone else recognizes it or not. As we prepared to leave the gala an hour later, I found myself oddly at peace. The revenge I'd so meticulously planned had transformed into something else entirely, not a moment of triumph over Vanessa, but a reclamation of my own perspective on value, worth, and authenticity. The pink diamond on my finger caught the light as Matthew helped me into my coat, its brilliance unchanged by others' perceptions or judgments. Like the truth it had revealed, its value was intrinsic, present whether acknowledged or not, enduring beyond any single moment of vindication. Walking out into the cool night air, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of Vanessa's judgment, of our unbalanced friendship, of my own carefully constructed revenge, all of it seemed to fall away, leaving only the clarity that comes with finally seeing things as they truly are. In the end, the most valuable revelation wasn't about the ring at all, but about myself, about the kind of person I wanted to be and the kinds of relationships I deserved. In showing Vanessa the truth about the diamond, I had ultimately discovered a more important truth about my own worth, one that, like my grandmother's precious gift, had been there all along, waiting to be recognized. The truth has a way of radiating outward, touching everything in its path. In the weeks following Vanessa's charity gala, I discovered this firsthand as ripples from that evening continued to spread through my life in unexpected ways. The morning after the event, I woke to dozens of notifications on my phone, comments on photos from the gala that had already begun circulating on social media. In several, I was visible in the background, the distinctive pink diamond catching the light even in candid shots. The Style magazine editor had tagged me in a post about statement jewelry with stories to tell, and someone had started a thread speculating about the ring's provenance and value. Matthew rolled over in bed beside me, squinting at the screen over my shoulder. "Looks like your grandmother's ring is becoming an Instagram celebrity." "This wasn't part of the plan," I murmured, scrolling through the notifications with growing unease. The attention I'd orchestrated for one evening was taking on a life of its own. "Welcome to the digital age," Matthew replied, pressing a kiss to my shoulder before getting up. "Once something's out there, it doesn't stay contained. Especially not something that sparkles like that." He was right, of course. In my focus on Vanessa's reaction, I hadn't fully considered the wider implications of revealing the ring's value in such a public setting. Now I was facing the uncomfortable reality that my grandmother's private keepsake had become a topic of public speculation. My first instinct was damage control. I deleted the most intrusive comments on my own social media, declined interview requests from 2 local lifestyle bloggers, and scheduled an appointment to have the diamond restored to its original, unassuming setting as soon as possible. But even as I took these steps, I recognized something had fundamentally changed. Knowledge once shared couldn't be reclaimed. The quiet dignity with which my grandmother had carried this valuable piece was no longer possible for me, at least not in the same way. As I dressed for work that Monday, I carefully secured the ring in its temporary case, unwilling to wear it in either setting until the situation settled. The weight of its absence on my finger felt strange after months of constant wear. I realized I'd grown accustomed to its presence, the way one adapts to a watch or wedding band, noticing its absence more acutely than its presence. At the publishing house, I tried to focus on manuscript deadlines and marketing plans, but my mind kept drifting back to unanswered questions. How had my grandmother acquired such a valuable stone? Why had she kept its worth secret, even during periods of financial hardship? And why had she chosen to pass it specifically to me, with only the cryptic hint about its value? These questions led me to call my mother during my lunch break, something I'd hesitated to do since discovering the ring's worth. Our relationship had always been complicated, loving but distant, marked by fundamental differences in personality and priorities. She'd never been particularly close to her mother, my grandmother, and I'd worried how she might react to learning I'd inherited something so valuable while she'd received only household items and photographs. "Emma, what a nice surprise," she answered on the third ring, the background noise suggesting she was at the community center where she volunteered. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine, Mom. I just have some questions about Grandma's ring." A pause. "The one she left you? What about it? Did you know what it's worth?" I asked directly, hearing my own heartbeat in the silence that followed. Another longer pause. "She told you then?" The simple response confirmed what I'd begun to suspect, that my mother had known all along. "Not exactly. I had it appraised after a friend made some comments about it." My mother sighed, and I could picture her removing her reading glasses as she often did when conversations turned serious. "That sounds like Eleanor. She always said the ring would reveal its own truth when the time was right." "Mom, it's worth millions." "Did you know that?" "Yes." No hesitation this time. "I've known since I was about your age." "And you never wanted it?" I asked carefully, voicing the concern that had been nagging at me. She laughed softly. "Oh, Emma, that ring comes with more complications than you've discovered yet. I made my peace long ago with not being its keeper." "What complications?" "Where did it come from? Grandpa couldn't have afforded something like this on a professor's salary." "It wasn't from your grandfather," she said simply. "It was from the man she loved before him, the man she couldn't marry." This revelation stunned me into silence. My grandmother's marriage to my grandfather had been the stuff of family legend, a 47-year union of intellectual equals, passionate about literature and education. I'd grown up hearing stories of their courtship, their shared academic pursuits, their unwavering commitment through hardship and joy. Not once had anyone mentioned a previous love. "I don't understand," I finally said. "It's not my story to tell fully," my mother replied. "Your grandmother left you a letter with the ring. Did you read it?" "There was no letter," I said, confusion mounting. "Just the ring itself." "That's strange." She was very specific about the letter. "She showed it to me years ago, said it explained everything about the ring's history and why she wanted you to have it." My mind raced, trying to recall every detail of that final visit with my grandmother. She had been frail but lucid, pressing the ring into my palm with trembling fingers. There had been no envelope, no letter, just her enigmatic words about the ring being more valuable than anyone knew. "Maybe she changed her mind about sharing the story," my mother suggested after a moment. "Or maybe she simply forgot in those final days. Her mind was starting to wander." But that didn't feel right. My grandmother had been deliberate in her actions, even as her body failed her. She wouldn't have forgotten something so important. "Do you know where she kept important documents?" I asked. "Maybe the letter is still among her things." "Richard and I cleared out her house months ago," my mother reminded me. "Everything of value was distributed according to her will. But there was her study desk. The roll top with all those little compartments. We couldn't find the key, so we left it locked. It's in storage with a few other pieces we couldn't bring ourselves to sell or donate yet." A flicker of hope ignited within me. "Can I check it? This weekend, maybe?" "Of course. I'll text you the storage unit information." "But Emma," she hesitated, "whatever you discover about that ring, remember your grandmother was a product of her generation. Choices we might find incomprehensible today made perfect sense in her world." This cryptic warning only intensified my curiosity. What choices? What secrets had my proper academic grandmother carried silently for all those decades? "I'll remember," I promised. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, staring at the empty space on my finger where the ring had been. Each answer seemed to uncover 3 new questions, the mystery deepening rather than resolving. My phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "It's Vanessa. Can we talk? In person, not at the office." "Important." I stared at the message, surprised. We hadn't communicated since the gala 4 days earlier, when our conversation in the ladies' lounge had seemed to mark the end of our friendship. What could be so important now? Curiosity won out over caution. "When and where?" I texted back. "The Arbor Cafe, 4 p.m. today? Private booth in back." I hesitated, then agreed. The arbor was a quiet spot far from our usual haunts, suggesting Vanessa wanted discretion. Whatever she needed to discuss, it clearly wasn't something she wanted overheard by mutual acquaintances. The rest of my workday passed in distracted anticipation. By the time I arrived at the cafe, 5 minutes before our agreed meeting time, my imagination had conjured scenarios ranging from tearful reconciliation to calculated confrontation. Vanessa was already there, seated in the farthest booth with her back to the wall and a large sunglasses perched on her head despite the cafe's dim lighting. She looked uncharacteristically subdued in a simple black turtleneck and jeans, an outfit I'd never seen her wear in our decade of friendship. "Thanks for coming," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. No air kisses, no effusive greeting, just simple acknowledgement. "Your text was intriguing," I replied, studying her face. Up close, I could see the strain of the past few days in the shadows beneath her eyes, imperfectly concealed by expensive concealer. "I'll get straight to it." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "There's a problem with your ring." My heart skipped a beat. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that involves my husband's family." She glanced around the cafe before continuing. "After the gala, Richard couldn't stop talking about your pink diamond. Apparently, his grandfather lost a similar stone in the 1960s, a rare pink diamond that had been in their family for generations." "That's quite a coincidence," I said carefully, a sense of foreboding growing within me. "That's what I said. But then Richard started digging through old family photos last night and found pictures of the original ring." She slid her phone across the table, opened to an image of a black and white photograph. "Look familiar?" I peered at the screen, my breath catching. The photograph showed a young woman's hand wearing what appeared to be my grandmother's ring in its original setting. The same distinctive Art Deco design, the same unusual diamond placement. "This could be any similar vintage piece," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Art Deco jewelry often followed similar patterns. "That's exactly what I told Richard," Vanessa agreed, surprising me. "But he's convinced it's the same ring, the one his grandfather reported stolen from their Manhattan apartment in 1963. He's been on the phone with the family lawyer all morning." The implications hit me like a physical blow. If what Vanessa was saying was true, my beloved heirloom, my grandmother's cherished possession, might be stolen property. Property belonging to my former friend's husband's family. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, searching her face for signs of the satisfaction or malice I might have expected. Instead, I found only weary concern. "Because despite everything, I don't want to see you blindsided." She reclaimed her phone, tucking it into her purse. "Richard is building a case. They'll probably contact you formally within days, requesting the return of the ring." "But it was my grandmother's." "She left it to me legally. And how she obtained it will be the question." Vanessa's gaze was direct now, all pretense abandoned. "Emma, if the ring was stolen, even 60 years ago, and the original owners can prove it, you could lose it. There could even be legal consequences." "For me? That's absurd." I had no idea. "Not for you," she interrupted gently. "For your grandmother's memory. They'll investigate how she came to possess it. Whatever the truth is, it will become public knowledge." The thought of my grandmother's name being dragged through some kind of inheritance scandal made me physically ill. She had been respected, dignified, private, the antithesis of the kind of person who would knowingly possess stolen goods. "This can't be happening," I murmured, more to myself than to Vanessa. "I'm sorry," she said, and remarkably she sounded sincere. "If it helps, I tried to convince Richard to handle this discreetly, to approach you privately before bringing in lawyers. But the family has a very specific approach to recovering lost assets." "Assets," I repeated hollowly. "Is that all it is to them? Because to me, it's the last thing my grandmother gave me before she died. It's her legacy." Vanessa was quiet for a moment, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. For what it's worth, I do understand that part. "Which is why I'm here warning you instead of letting Richard's lawyers ambush you." I looked up sharply, finally recognizing what seemed different about her. She was being genuine, not performing social niceties or calculating advantages, just acting with simple human decency. "Thank you," I said, meaning it despite everything. "This at least gives me time to figure out what's going on." "You should lawyer up," she advised, practical even in this strange new dynamic between us. "I can recommend someone if you'd like." I shook my head. "Not yet. First, I need to learn the truth about how my grandmother got the ring. There may be a perfectly reasonable explanation that clears up this whole misunderstanding." "I hope so." Vanessa stood, gathering her purse. For what it's worth, I believe you. And I believe your grandmother probably had no idea about the ring's complicated history either. It was a surprisingly generous assumption from someone who had previously mocked that very ring as worthless costume jewelry. Perhaps our confrontation at the gala had affected her more deeply than I'd realized. Vanessa, I called as she turned to leave. Why did you really warn me? After everything that happened between us? She paused, considering her answer carefully. Maybe I'm trying to be better. Or maybe I just didn't want Richard's family drama to be the final chapter in our story. A ghost of her familiar smirk appeared. Besides, watching you take down the mighty Harrington family over a disputed diamond could be entertaining. I've always appreciated a good power struggle when I'm not directly in the crosshairs. With that more recognizable glimpse of the Vanessa I knew, she was gone, leaving me alone with the unsettling knowledge that my grandmother's precious gift, and possibly her reputation, were suddenly at risk. I spent the remainder of the afternoon researching the Harrington family, discovering they were indeed the kind of people who employed teams of lawyers to protect their considerable assets. Richard's grandfather, Cornelius Harrington II, had been a significant collector of rare gems in the mid-20th century. His Manhattan apartment had indeed been burglarized in 1963, with several valuable pieces reported stolen, including what the insurance claim described as one pink diamond ring, approximately 3 carats, set in platinum with Art Deco detailing. The description matched my grandmother's ring with disturbing precision. But how could it have come into her possession? My grandmother, Eleanor Wright, had been a college professor's wife in Chicago during the 1960s, moving in academic circles far removed from Manhattan's elite. She'd never mentioned connections to New York society or the Harrington family, unless the man she'd loved before my grandfather, the one my mother had mentioned. Could he somehow be connected to the ring's history? By the time Matthew arrived at my apartment that evening, I'd worked myself into a state of anxious speculation. I explained Vanessa's warning and the apparent connection to the Harrington family, watching his face shift from surprise to concern. "This is complicated," he said finally, running a hand through his hair, "but not necessarily disastrous. There could be a legitimate explanation for how your grandmother acquired the ring." "Like what? That someone gifted her a stolen diamond worth millions? That makes her either complicit or tragically naive. Or maybe it wasn't stolen at all," Matthew suggested. "Maybe the Harringtons are mistaken. Jewelry designs can be similar, especially from the same era. Rich families sometimes inflate insurance claims. There are multiple possibilities that don't implicate your grandmother in anything unethical." His logical approach calmed me slightly. My mother mentioned a letter, something my grandmother apparently left to explain the ring's history. It might be in her old desk in storage. "I'm going to check this weekend. Want me to come with you?" I nodded, grateful for his steady presence. "Yes. Whatever I find, I think I'll need the support. Then I'll be there." He squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Try not to catastrophize until we know more. This could all be a misunderstanding." I wanted to believe him, but the specific details of the Harrington claim gnawed at me. The timing, the description, the undeniable similarity between the photographed ring and my inheritance. It felt like too many coincidences aligned. That night, I dreamed of my grandmother, not as the elderly woman who had passed the ring to me with trembling hands, but as a young woman about my age, her face alight with a passion I'd never witnessed in my knowing of her. In the dream, she pressed a letter into my hands, urgently whispering words I couldn't quite hear. I woke just after dawn, the phantom weight of that unread letter heavy in my unconscious mind. Saturday morning found Matthew and I at the storage facility across town, my mother's access code opening a medium-sized unit packed with furniture and boxes from my grandmother's house. The roll-top desk she'd mentioned sat against the back wall, its curved wooden top closed over whatever secrets it might contain. "It's locked," Matthew confirmed after examining the mechanism. "And it's a tubular lock, not something you can just pick with a paperclip. Then we'll have to find another way." I ran my fingers along the desk's edges, searching for hidden compartments or spare keys. My grandmother was methodical. She wouldn't have left the key somewhere completely inaccessible. We spent the next hour carefully examining every piece of furniture in the storage unit, opening drawers, checking under cushions, looking inside vases and boxes. Nothing. "Maybe we need to think less literally," Matthew suggested, wiping dust from his hands. "If she wanted you to find the key but keep it secure, where would she put it?" I paused, considering his question from my grandmother's perspective. She had been a literature professor, someone who appreciated symbolism and meaning. If she'd hidden a key to her most private thoughts. The book, I said suddenly, turning to a box I'd brought from my apartment, the few personal items my grandmother had specifically left to me, including a collection of her favorite poetry. She gave me her Dickinson anthology, said it held the keys to understanding her. I'd taken the comment metaphorically at the time, assuming she meant the poetry itself provided insight into her character. But what if she had been more literal? With shaking hands, I opened the box and removed the well-worn volume of Emily Dickinson poems. It had been my grandmother's constant companion, annotated, dog-eared, clearly beloved. I carefully fanned the pages, hoping for a small key to fall out. Nothing. Disappointment washed over me until Matthew gently took the book, examining its binding and cover. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a subtle irregularity in the inside back cover. "There's something under the end paper." Sure enough, when I looked closely, I could see a small rectangular bulge beneath the paper lining the cover. Matthew carefully worked the edge of his credit card under the loose corner, gradually separating the paper from the board beneath. There, nestled in a precisely cut recess, was a small brass key. She really did mean it literally, I breathed, carefully extracting the key from its hiding place. The book held the key to understanding her. Back at the desk, the key slid perfectly into the lock, the mechanism turning smoothly despite years of disuse. The curved top rolled back to reveal an organized workspace. Pen holders, cubbies filled with stationery, small drawers for supplies. At the center lay a single cream-colored envelope, my name written across the front in my grandmother's elegant cursive. With trembling fingers, I picked it up, feeling the weight of several pages inside. "This is it. The letter my mother mentioned. Do you want privacy?" Matthew asked, sensitive to the moment. I shook my head. "No. Stay, please." Carefully breaking the wax seal, my grandmother's final touch of formality, I unfolded several sheets of heavy stationery, the handwriting firm and clear, written before illness had weakened her hand. "My dearest Emma," I read aloud, my voice catching slightly. "If you are reading this, then you have both inherited my ring and discovered there is more to its story than I revealed in life. Forgive an old woman's secrecy. Some truths are better shared after their keeper has passed beyond judgment." I glanced up at Matthew, who nodded encouragement before continuing. "The ring came to me in the summer of 1963 from the man I loved before your grandfather. His name was James Sullivan, and he was the driver for a wealthy New York family called the Harringtons." My heart stuttered at the confirmation of the connection. Matthew moved closer, his presence steadying as I read on. "James and I met in Chicago when the Harringtons visited for a charity event where I was working as a student volunteer. He was unlike anyone I had known, worldly yet unpretentious, insightful about human nature from observing his employers' lives while remaining untainted by their excesses. We loved each other immediately. Completely, in that way youth allows before caution and compromise enter one's understanding. For 2 years, we maintained our relationship through letters and brief visits when the Harringtons' travels brought him to the Midwest. James wished to marry me, but his circumstances were complicated. The Harringtons treated him as something between family and servant. They paid for his sister's medical treatments, provided housing for his aging mother, created golden handcuffs he couldn't easily break. Then came the night that changed everything. The Harringtons hosted a party at their Manhattan apartment, and in the chaos of many guests, the wife's jewelry case was left unlocked. By morning, several pieces were missing, including a pink diamond ring that Mr. Harrington had purchased more for investment than sentiment. James was immediately suspected. He had access to the apartment, knowledge of the family's habits, and, most damningly, had been seen arguing with Mr. Harrington the previous day after requesting time off to visit me in Chicago. The police questioned him extensively, though no charges were filed due to lack of evidence. Nevertheless, the family dismissed him, withdrew support for his sister's treatments, and evicted his mother from the apartment they had provided. His life was systematically dismantled based on suspicion alone. 2 days later, James appeared at my door in Chicago, distraught and desperate. He showed me the ring. Yes, the very one now in your possession, and confessed he had indeed taken it, not out of greed but revenge for years of subtle degradations and the Harringtons' refusal to allow him to build a life of his own. He had planned to sell it, use the money to start fresh with me far from New York. Instead, he found himself overwhelmed with the reality of his actions, unable to part with stolen goods, yet equally unable to return it without facing consequences that would destroy what remained of his life. I should have turned him away, should have insisted he return the ring and face whatever came. That would have been the ethical choice, the proper choice. Instead, I did something I have carried silently for decades. I agreed to keep the ring hidden while he established himself elsewhere under a new name. He would send for me when it was safe. 3 months later, I received word that James had died in a car accident in California. The details were sparse. He had been living under an assumed name, and it was only through our prearranged messaging system that I learned of his fate at all. So I was left with the ring, unable to return it without implicating myself and tarnishing James's memory, unable to sell it without drawing attention. Eventually, I met your grandfather, a good and honorable man who deserved a wife without secrets. I kept the ring hidden for years, wearing it only after we moved to Boston for your grandfather's tenure, where no one knew its origins. As decades passed, the statute of limitations on the theft expired, but I remained silent. The ring became mine through time, if not through right. I told your grandfather it had been my mother's, the first and last significant lie of our marriage. He never questioned it, and gradually I allowed myself to separate the ring from its troubled beginnings, to see it as a complex reminder of my own capacity for moral compromise in the name of love. Why am I telling you this now, beyond the grave? Because the ring is valuable not just in monetary terms, and you deserve to know exactly what you've inherited. With it comes a moral complexity I have wrestled with for a lifetime. The diamond belongs, in strictest terms, to the Harrington family. Yet by now, the insurance claim has surely been paid, the loss absorbed into their considerable fortune. I leave the ultimate decision to you, Emma, knowing your ethical compass has always been stronger than mine. Perhaps you will choose to return it, to clear a debt I was too cowardly to address. Perhaps you will keep it, finding justification in the decades that have passed, or in the genuine love that prompted its taking, misguided though that action was. Whatever you decide, know that I have loved you fully and without reservation, and that this ring, symbol of my greatest moral failing, is also evidence that even the most proper and careful person contains multitudes, contradictions, capacities for both weakness and strength that remain hidden until circumstance reveals them. With eternal love and belated honesty, your grandmother, Eleanor. I lowered the letter, tears streaming down my face. The grandmother I had known, principled, proper, the moral center of our family, had harbored this secret for decades, had loved a man enough to become complicit in his crime, had built her respectable life atop this hidden foundation. Emma? Matthew's voice was gentle. Are you okay? I don't know, I answered honestly. I feel like I've lost her all over again. The person I thought she was. Seems more human now. He finished softly. More complex? He was right. My grandmother's confession revealed not a criminal, but a young woman caught in an impossible situation, making choices driven by love rather than ethics. I couldn't condone what she'd done, yet I understood it with an unexpected clarity. The Harringtons were right, I said, carefully refolding the letter. It is their ring, legally and ethically. After 60 years? With insurance presumably paid? Matthew frowned. There's a difference between technical ownership and practical reality. But now I know the truth. I can't pretend I don't. So what will you do? I touched the envelope, thinking of my grandmother's final line about my stronger ethical compass. I need to talk to a lawyer. And I need to decide what matters most, clearing my grandmother's conscience posthumously or protecting her reputation. The decision weighed on me throughout the following week. I consulted a lawyer specializing in property claims who confirmed what I already suspected. While the statute of limitations had long expired on the theft itself, the Harringtons could potentially make a civil claim for the return of their property with no time limitation. But it's complicated, she explained during our consultation. They would need to prove it's definitely the same ring, that it was stolen rather than misplaced or gifted, and overcome various defenses including laches, essentially that they waited an unreasonable time to pursue the claim. Courts often don't look favorably on claims resurging after decades, especially once evidence has degraded and witnesses have passed away. So legally I might be able to keep it? Possibly. It would likely come down to the specific judge and jurisdiction. She studied me across her desk. But I sense you're wrestling with the ethical dimension as much as the legal one. I nodded, thinking of my grandmother's letter. The ring was stolen. Whatever justifications existed, that fact remains. But returning it would mean exposing my grandmother's role in concealing stolen property. Her reputation, her legacy, that's a personal calculation I can't make for you, the lawyer said kindly. I can only outline the legal parameters. The moral ones are yours alone to navigate. I left her office no closer to a decision, the weight of my grandmother's secret pressing down on me with each step. The irony wasn't lost on me. The ring that had caused Vanessa to misjudge me had now forced me to reconsider my judgment of my own grandmother. That evening, I received another text from Vanessa. Harrington lawyers drafting formal letter requesting ring's return. Will be sent next week. Thought you should know. The timeline was accelerating. Soon, I would be forced to take a position, to defend my ownership of the ring or acknowledge the Harringtons' claim. Either way, the comfortable ambiguity of indecision was rapidly disappearing. I called Matthew, needing his balanced perspective. The Harrington lawyers are moving forward. I'm running out of time to decide what to do. Then maybe it's time to stop thinking and start acting, he replied, his voice clear through the phone. What's your instinct telling you? I considered his question, pushing aside legal strategies and practical considerations to access my deepest intuition. That the truth matters. That my grandmother would want me to do what she couldn't bring herself to do. Return the ring? Yes. But on my terms, in a way that honors her story rather than erasing it. He was quiet for a moment. You have something specific in mind. I think I do. The outline of a plan was forming, not a vindictive one like my scheme regarding Vanessa, but something restorative. Can you come over? I want to talk it through. An hour later, Matthew and I sat at my kitchen table, papers spread before us, my grandmother's letter, the lawyer's notes, my own hastily scribbled ideas. Together, we crafted an approach that felt right, truthful without being destructive, acknowledging history without dishonoring my grandmother's memory. The next morning, instead of waiting for the Harringtons' legal letter, I took action. I called Richard directly, using the contact information Vanessa had provided. Emma, he answered, surprise evident in his tone. I didn't expect to hear from you. I understand your family is preparing a claim regarding my grandmother's ring, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'd like to discuss this directly, without lawyers if possible. A pause. That would be unusual. Our family typically handles these matters through proper legal channels. This is an unusual situation that deserves a more personal approach. The ring has a story that formal legal proceedings won't capture. Another pause, longer this time. You know something about how your grandmother acquired it. I do. And I'm willing to share that information and discuss the ring's return, but only with you directly, not through legal representatives. And only if you agree to hear the full story before making judgments. The line went quiet as Richard considered my proposal. I could almost hear the internal debate, the Harrington family presumption that proper procedures must be followed, warring with natural curiosity about what I might know. All right, he finally said. I can meet you tomorrow afternoon. My office, 3 o'clock? Not your office, I countered. Neutral ground. There's a private room at the Historical Society downtown. I've already reserved it. You've been planning this. Let's just say I've been considering the most appropriate way to honor both your family's claim and my grandmother's memory. He agreed, curiosity evidently overcoming his preference for controlling the encounter. The following day, I arrived at the Historical Society 30 minutes early, setting up the room exactly as I'd envisioned. My grandmother's letter, a photocopy, not the original, lay on the table alongside documentation I'd gathered about James Sullivan, the Harringtons' driver, old newspaper clippings mentioning the jewelry theft, a timeline of events based on my grandmother's account, and in the center, secured in a velvet box, the ring itself, back in its original vintage setting, the pink diamond nestled in the Art Deco design that had first caught my grandmother's eye all those decades ago. Richard arrived precisely at 3, dressed in an impeccable suit that spoke of generational wealth. He looked startlingly like an older version of what I imagined James Sullivan's wealthy employer must have been, confident, entitled, accustomed to getting his way. Thank you for coming, I said, gesturing to the chair across from mine. You've gone to considerable trouble, he noted, glancing at the arranged materials without sitting. Is this necessary? I believe it is. What you're claiming isn't just a valuable object. It's a piece of intertwined history, your family's and mine. He seemed to consider this, then finally took the offered seat. Vanessa said you were different. More thoughtful than most people in our circle. The comment surprised me, not just the apparent compliment, but the indication that Vanessa had discussed me with him beyond the ring situation. I'll take that as a compliment, though I suspect our definitions of thoughtful might differ. Perhaps. His gaze dropped to the velvet box. Is that it? Yes. But before we discuss its future, I'd like you to understand its past. I slid the photocopy of my grandmother's letter toward him. This explains how the ring came into my family's possession. Richard read in silence, his expression shifting subtly as he absorbed my grandmother's confession. When he finished, he looked up, his face unreadable. This James Sullivan, he was my great-grandfather's driver? Yes. Does the name mean anything to you? He shook his head. Family staff from that era aren't exactly featured in our histories. Though the theft itself is something of a legend, the mysterious disappearance that was never solved. It's solved now, I said quietly. So it seems. He tapped the letter thoughtfully. Your grandmother was remarkably candid, even if posthumously. She was an honest woman placed in an impossible situation by someone she loved. Her choice to keep the ring was wrong, but her reasons were understandable. Understandable? His eyebrows rose. She knowingly concealed stolen property for decades. Yes. Just as your great-grandfather knowingly destroyed a man's life based on suspicion rather than proof. Just as your family created conditions where loyalty was demanded, but never truly reciprocated. I met his gaze steadily. There are no perfect actors in this story, Mr. Harrington. He stiffened slightly. My family's treatment of their staff 60 years ago is hardly relevant to the matter at hand. I disagree. Context matters. James Sullivan didn't wake up one morning and arbitrarily decide to steal from his employers. There was a history of exploitation, of promises made and broken. I gestured to the newspaper clippings. According to these articles, your great-grandfather was known for demanding absolute dedication from his household staff while treating them as disposable when convenient. This sounds dangerously close to justifying theft. Not justifying, contextualizing. I leaned forward. I've brought the ring today because I acknowledge it belongs to your family, legally and ethically. I intend to return it. But I want its full story recognized, not erased or sanitized to fit a simpler narrative of theft and recovery. Richard's expression shifted from defensive to curious. What exactly are you proposing? A mutual acknowledgement of the complex history behind this object. I opened the velvet box, revealing the ring. Your family receives the ring back, with no public legal battle. In exchange, you formally acknowledge that my grandmother was not the thief, that she received it under complicated circumstances, and her decades of silent possession were motivated by love and loyalty, not greed. That's not how these situations are typically handled. I'm aware. But this isn't a typical situation. Richard studied the ring for a long moment, then looked back at me. And what about the monetary value? The ring has been appraised at several $1 million. You're simply handing that over? The ring's value was never mine to claim, I said simply. I inherited it believing it was a sentimental piece with modest worth. Learning otherwise hasn't changed the fundamental question of ownership. He seemed genuinely surprised by this answer. Most people would fight tooth and nail to keep something so valuable, regardless of its origins. I'm not most people, and I suspect neither was your great-grandfather's driver, James Sullivan. He could have disappeared with that ring, started a new life funded by its sale. Instead, his conscience troubled him enough that he ultimately couldn't go through with his plan. Richard was quiet for a long moment, considering. What would you like my family to do specifically regarding your grandmother's reputation? A simple written statement acknowledging that Eleanor Wright came into possession of the ring through circumstances beyond her control, and that her character should not be judged by this single complicated chapter of her life. Nothing public unless the story somehow leaks, just a document for my family's peace of mind. And that's all? I nodded. That's all. He reached for the ring box, examining the pink diamond with expert appreciation. It truly is extraordinary, one of the finest pink diamonds from that era still in its original setting. It deserves to be with its rightful owners, I said, but I hope they'll value its history as well as its monetary worth. Richard closed the box carefully, his decision apparently made. I'll need to have the ring authenticated, of course, but assuming it's as represented, I believe we can agree to your terms. He extended his hand across the table. No lawyers necessary after all. We shook hands, the weight of my grandmother's secret lifting slightly with this commitment to a resolution that honored truth without destruction. As Richard prepared to leave with the ring, he paused. Vanessa was right about you. "You are different." A ghost of a smile crossed his usually stern features. "She also said you'd find a way to resolve this that made everyone else look slightly worse by comparison." I'm not sure if she meant it as a compliment. "With Vanessa, it's always hard to tell," I replied, surprised again by his mention of her assessment of me. After he left, I sat alone in the Historical Society room, surrounded by the documentary evidence of my grandmother's secret life. Without the ring physically present, these papers seemed both more significant and less consequential, the story they told now the primary inheritance rather than the valuable object itself. I carefully gathered everything, preserving these records of a complexity I would never have guessed at before Vanessa's mockery set this whole revelation in motion. The ring was gone, but the understanding it had brought remained, about my grandmother, about value, about the tangled relationships between objects and people and history. When I called Matthew to tell him what had happened, his first question surprised me. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Relieved? Sad? Something else?" I considered carefully before answering. "Peaceful, I think. Like I've honored my grandmother by completing what she couldn't bring herself to do." "Returning the ring?" "Yes. But more than that, acknowledging the full truth of who she was. Not just the proper moral professor's wife, but also the young woman who loved deeply enough to compromise her principles, who carried that complexity her whole life without letting it embitter her." "That's quite a legacy," Matthew said softly. "Maybe more valuable than the ring itself." "I think it is." I looked down at my bare finger, the phantom weight of the ring still sometimes present in my muscle memory. She was so much more complicated than I ever knew. It makes me wonder how many other stories lie just beneath the surface of the people we think we understand. In the weeks that followed, the formal resolution proceeded exactly as agreed. The Harringtons' experts authenticated the ring, and Richard provided the written statement acknowledging my grandmother had not been the thief. The matter was closed quietly, with no public accusations or legal proceedings. I had expected to feel a sense of loss after returning the ring, but instead found myself experiencing an unexpected lightness. The responsibility of carrying both the valuable object and its complicated history had been heavier than I'd realized. One afternoon, about a month after the ring's return, I received a text from Vanessa asking to meet for coffee. Our interactions since the gala had been limited to the ring situation, and I wasn't sure what remained to discuss now that the matter was resolved. Curiosity won out, and I agreed to meet at a small cafe near my office. She was already there when I arrived, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in years, dressed in jeans and a simple blouse rather than her usual carefully curated designer ensemble. "You look different," I said as I sat down across from her. "Divorce will do that," she replied matter-of-factly. I blinked in surprise. "You and Richard? When? Why?" 2 weeks ago. As for why? She shrugged, a gesture more genuine than her usual affected movements. "Let's just say your grandmother's story made me reconsider some things about relationships built on obligation rather than choice." "I don't understand." Vanessa stirred her coffee, choosing her words carefully. "Richard showed me your grandmother's letter. The part about James Sullivan being trapped in golden handcuffs, unable to build the life he wanted because of all the Harringtons had done for his family. And that reminded you of your marriage somehow?" "More than I care to admit." Her smile was rueful. "Richard's family funded my father's business ventures, paid for my brother's rehab, secured my mother's position on every board that matters in this city. For years, I've been the polished, perfect Harrington wife in exchange for their continued support of my family." I was stunned by this revelation. Vanessa had always seemed so naturally aligned with Richard's world, so comfortable with its wealth and status requirements. I'd never imagined she might feel trapped by it. "I had no idea," I said honestly. "That was rather the point. Even you, who's known me longer than almost anyone, saw only what I wanted you to see." She glanced down at my bare ring finger. "Until recently, when things started becoming more transparent between us." The parallel was striking, both Vanessa and my grandmother presenting carefully constructed public personas that concealed complicated private truths. "Was returning the ring the catalyst for your divorce?" I asked, trying to understand the connection. "Not directly, but watching how you handled it, choosing integrity over financial advantage, caring more about your grandmother's true story than her perfect image, it clarified some things I'd been avoiding confronting." She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "Plus, Richard's obsession with recovering the ring revealed a side of the Harrington family priorities I couldn't quite stomach anymore. There's something disturbing about a man more passionate about reclaiming a diamond than understanding his wife. So what happens now? With your family's connection to the Harringtons? It's complicated. Messy. The kind of mess I've spent my entire life avoiding. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly, but also honest for the first time in years. We sat in silence for a moment, the remnants of our decade-long friendship transformed into something I couldn't quite define. Not the easy intimacy we'd once shared, but not the strained animosity of recent months either. Something new, built on a more authentic foundation. "Why tell me all this?" I finally asked. "We haven't exactly been confidants lately, because you're the only person who might understand." Vanessa's expression was unusually vulnerable. "Everyone else in my life is connected to the Harringtons somehow. But you walked away from millions of dollars because it was the right thing to do. That's a perspective I could use right now." "I'm not sure I'm qualified to give life advice," I said carefully. "My own decisions haven't exactly been straightforward lately. That's exactly why I trust your perspective. You've been wrestling with real complexity, not just following social scripts." She hesitated, then added, "And I owe you an apology. For the ring comments, obviously, but for more than that. For years of friendship where I was often less than a good friend." The apology was unexpected, direct, unqualified, sincere in a way Vanessa rarely allowed herself to be. It struck me that perhaps the ring had changed both of us, forcing a confrontation with aspects of ourselves we might otherwise have continued to ignore. "I appreciate that," I said simply. "And for what it's worth, I think choosing honesty, even when it's messy, takes more courage than maintaining a perfect facade." She smiled, a genuine expression that reminded me of the young woman I'd first befriended in college, before status and appearances had calcified around her. "That's what I hoped you'd say." As our conversation continued, touching on her divorce plans, my work projects, Matthew's latest architectural commission, I realized something fundamental had shifted between us. The power dynamic that had subtly defined our friendship for years, her status and wealth positioning her perpetually above me, had dissolved, replaced by something closer to genuine equality. Later that evening, as Matthew and I walked through the park near my apartment, I told him about Vanessa's surprising revelation and our transformed interaction. "It sounds like your grandmother's ring had quite an impact," he observed. "Not just on you, but on everyone it touched." "I've been thinking about that," I admitted. "The ring itself is gone, but its effects remain. The truths it uncovered, the changes it prompted. Like ripples continuing outward long after the stone that caused them has been removed." "Poetic," Matthew smiled, squeezing my hand. "But accurate, I think. Objects have power beyond their material value. That's what Vanessa never understood until now, maybe. She always equated worth with price, missing all the other ways value manifests." We paused at a bench overlooking the small lake at the park's center, sitting close together as twilight settled around us. Without the ring's weight on my finger, I found myself more conscious of Matthew's hand in mine, of the simple pleasure of physical connection without symbolic complication. "I've been thinking," he said after a comfortable silence, "about what comes next for us." My heart quickened slightly. "What do you mean?" "This whole experience, watching you navigate the ring situation, seeing how you balanced ethics and compassion, even your handling of the Vanessa friendship, it's clarified something for me. Which is," he turned to face me directly, his expression serious but warm, "that I want to build a life with you. Not because of any external marker of status or success, but because of who you fundamentally are." "Are you proposing?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not exactly. Not yet." He smiled, his thumb tracing patterns on my palm. "I know the timing would be strange, right after all this ring drama, but I wanted you to know that's where I'm heading, where I hope we're heading together." Relief and joy mingled within me. He was right. An immediate proposal would have felt reactive, tied too closely to the ring's departure rather than our relationship's natural evolution. But knowing his intentions, having this honest conversation about our future, it felt perfect for where we stood. "I'd like that," I said simply. "Building a life together, I mean. When the timing is right for both of us. Without any million-dollar jewelry involved," he added with a teasing smile. "Definitely without that." I laughed, leaning against his shoulder. "Though I can't promise there won't be other family secrets or moral dilemmas. Apparently those run in my genes. I'll take my chances." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "Complicated people tend to lead interesting lives. As darkness settled fully around us, the park lamps creating pools of gold light along the pathways, I thought again of my grandmother, the proper academic's wife who had carried a passionate secret her entire adult life, who had loved deeply enough to compromise her principles, but honestly enough to eventually confess her moral failing, who had trusted me to make the right choice when she no longer could. The ring that had linked us was gone now, returned to its legal owners. But the legacy she'd truly left me remained, not a valuable object, but a profound understanding of human complexity, of the capacity we all have for both weakness and strength, for error and redemption. My grandmother's final gift hadn't been the pink diamond at all, but the story behind it, a reminder that value isn't determined by appraisals or social consensus, but by the meaning we assign through our choices, our honesty, our willingness to acknowledge our full, complex selves. As Matthew and I walked home hand in hand, discussing dinner plans and weekend possibilities with comfortable ease, I felt a sense of peace more valuable than any gemstone. My grandmother's ring had completed its journey, revealing truths and prompting changes that would continue to resonate long after its physical presence had faded from my life. The most precious inheritance, I realized, wasn't something that could be stored in a safe deposit box or displayed on my hand. It was the understanding that our true value lies not in what we own or how others perceive us, but in the integrity with which we face our most difficult choices, and the courage to finally tell our most honest stories, even when they reveal our deepest flaws alongside our greatest capacities for love. In the end, that was the million-dollar value my grandmother had tried to tell me about all along, a worth impossible to calculate on any jeweler's scale, but infinitely more precious than even the rarest pink diamond.